Hi, I'm Kendall Cygan, and I'm here with Zuzana, and we're going to talk about today the food issues in regards to autism. We're here with the Transforming Autism Project. Zuzana, would you like to introduce yourself?
Good morning, my name is Zuzana Camm, and this is my first time with Transforming Autism, and it's a great privilege to be here with you. I'm going to be kind of more active guest today, so Kendall will speak through the webinar, and I'll add some comments and ideas as we go. So welcome everyone, and good morning. I hope you enjoy our webinar today.
Lovely. So just getting started, we're going to speak about why does my child have food issues and what can I do about it as a parent? And yes, so trying to think about this from a big objective today, we want to find a greater understanding of what is contributing to your child's food issues. And with that, it's going to be very important that you realize that when they show you something or when something is occurring, this is their behavior and this is their communication to you as a parent. So it's important to understand that you are meeting the child where they are at their level, not trying to push them or force them into anything, but letting them initiate whatever it may be that they are trying to communicate. So we're going to look at some simple strategies that you can use to support your child better in regards to eating. And a quick cautionary note is that the food issues for children with autism can be very complex. There are a lot of factors that come into play, and specifically, you can look at food issues from very, very diverse perspectives. You can see food issues from the outside as how am I going to behaviorally shape them? How am I going to modify this so that I can better interpret their behavior? Or you can look at it from the inside, which is what we want to do today. Looking at it from the inside, using a different perspective. What is my child trying to communicate to me? What are these factors that are going on around my child? And it's also essential that you consult medical professionals, and if there are anybody else on your child's team, such as a speech pathologist, a school teacher, get them involved in this conversation. Food issues are very vast. It can be in regards to anything, and the more help you can get, the better. And with that, I think Zuzana has a great example that she would like to share with us about a boy that she used to work with.
Kendall, could you please show us the next slide?
Yes.
Beautiful, thank you very much. So as Kendall suggested or started to explain, is that we really need to look at the presentation of a child from different angles. One of the angles is the emotional. So we need to think about what is my child's emotional experience around food, and maybe what is my child's experience outside of the mealtime, and how can we support our emotional connection and well-being of myself as someone who feeds the child and the child as well. Another very important area and massively important in children with autism are sensory needs. And the more we learn about our child's sensory needs, the better, especially at mealtimes, because the sensory is not only about the experience of food, but the sensory needs need to be looked at from the wider perspective, what's around the child and impacting the child to be able to focus on food, enjoy the food, process the food, be aware of the food and enjoy it. Another area we need to look at is behavioral. What is the behavior triggered by? Is it something perhaps learned and something that needs to be unlearned, and how can we support the behavior of the child during meal times? Another area is physiological. We need to look at the way the body works, and what are there any illnesses, perhaps allergies, any problems that we need to look at in order to help the child enjoy the meal times. Another area is motor-based difficulties, for example, low muscle tone in mouth or in the whole body, or postural instability. And now I'll go to the example. Now I've read the slide for you, Kendall. I thought it'll be good
perfect.
to introduce it before I give you this example. So I work with a boy who was just over 2 years old, and he had difficulties at meal times. He wouldn't sit at the table. He wouldn't eat. He wouldn't eat very much. He would snack all day on something that wasn't nutritionally very valuable for him. And his mom turned to me for support. And I'm not a feeding or eating specialist, I must say as well. I look at the emotional side of the child's experience and relationship, and I support families through play, and I support the relationship between the parents and the child. But I see this as a very important during meal times as well. So I played with little Adam. I'm changing his name, but I'll call him Adam today. And I've noticed that he got very distracted in his playroom because it was very busy with toys. There are lots of toys everywhere, and he would jump all the time, crash into things. He would like to feel window on his skin, the cold of the window. When I looked at meal times, I noticed that he was sitting on a big chair at a big table with his mom, and his mom was so engaged and devoted to exposing him to beautiful foods, and she always laid this beautiful feast for every meal time, and she felt really disappointed and frustrated and anxious about her child not eating well. I also noticed, I looked at the strengths, and I noticed that before the mom served the food, she would prepare it and cook it, and she always involved her son in it, and she would sit him on a worktop next to the stove, and she would sing to him. She would make up songs, and he would really, you could see on his face that he really enjoyed that special time with his mom during meal preparations. So my conclusion was, and my thinking was, okay, so this boy is very distracted by what's around him, and what's around him at the moment is too much, and he's very hyperactive in this environment. He's got low muscle tone. He really needs to feel his body all the time, and he's not touching floor with his feet, and the chair's too big and the table's too big. And he really likes those time with his mummy when she prepares the food. So we had this strategy. We thought, let's move him to the kitchen. Let's sit him at a small table so he can reach, his feet could reach the floor. And we did that. And we also put a gate at the door so he couldn't run away. But we simplified, we slowed down ourselves. So we approached him very slowly. Everything was calm and lovely. And it started to work much better. But it still wasn't the best. And then we thought, he's got too much food on the table. The mom's aim was to expose him to lots of variety and give him a choice, but it was too overwhelming for him. So we reduced it. We each had the same bowl with the same food, and this is when it started to work very well. So that's just an example of to think about the low muscle tone physiologically, the sensory, the overstimulation from outside, actually, not even the sensory experience of the food, but just the stimulation from the outside environment. And the behavior, the running away, was actually caused by something environmental. So we looked at all these areas. And then the boy moved the house, actually. And they had a new kitchen, and we obviously started what worked best. So we did the same as the same way as possible. And he started to run away again from the kitchen. And we were really at a loss. We thought, what's happening? And then after exploring everything possible, realized there was a bush outside of the kitchen window, and it had very shiny leaves. And every time when the sun was shining on the leaves, it was so visually disturbing him that he needed to run away. So it's another example that we have to be in a here and now, in the environment where we are, and really notice very subtle things and things you might not even normally think about. So that's just one example of how to look at the complexity.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that, Zuzana. And I also think you make really good points that in this situation, you really went to meeting the child where they were at instead of trying to adapt something else and trying to change more circumstances. You really just thought, what does the child need? Where are they right now? And how can I best suit them? And I think that that's absolutely wonderful. And you also make really good points that with all these challenges, there is a huge individual focus on the relationship of the child and the parent. And it's absolutely individual. Everything is going to be different. Every child is going to be different. So now when we look at autism and communication, briefly touched upon this in the beginning, but we're really looking at what is the child trying to communicate to you in this mealtime, in this eating situation where something is going wrong or there's an issue occurring. What are they trying to convey to you? And always remembering behavior is communication. So as Zuzana said, if the child is running away, looking at what is that communicating to me? It might not necessarily be that something is wrong with the food. It could mean that something is happening outside the window that is displeasant for them. So it's really looking at what are they trying to tell us. And Zuzana has this wonderful example here that I will let her explain because this is a really beautiful metaphor.
Can you please show us? Are you working on it? Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes, I must warn everyone, I really like metaphors and I like visual helpers for myself. And this is something I really like. So when we look at a child from the outside at the behaviors and of the first stone, and we might want to shape it to make the shape different. We want to shape the behavior and make it the way we want. We want a certain amount of food in a child. We want the child to sit in a certain way at a certain table. But there's also something very important we need to consider, and we've been talking about it ever since we started Kendall, and it's looking inside, because each child is different. And what fascinates me with children with autism is that their sensory experience of the world is different from the neurotypical people. And I have no idea. So I have to assume I have no idea what the child's experience is at the moment. So I need to explore, I need to look inside as much as I can from what I see from the outside. I think, what's happening inside? Who's the child? What's his experience of the world? And the inside of the stone suggesting, it's just the detective work of how can I find out about the child's experience? So that's just a metaphor and visual help to think there can be something really beautiful and special inside. So it's worth looking in.
Absolutely. And just another touching upon it again, that the behavior that they're showing you does mean something. So there is a reason why something is occurring at the dinner table. There's something behind it. So that's what we're here to look into, and also what can we do to help that situation. And there's this quote here from Guy, our CEO, saying that any feeding issues needed to be handled without emotion or anxiety on our part. So if we had the thought of, oh no, I don't want to go through this again, I don't know how we're going to get him to eat this meal, this is such a problem, this is going to be reflected in our behavior as a parent, which could then trigger something for the child. So this is a very important thing to touch upon, because I think that a lot of the times we don't realize how much our child is picking up on our energy and our behavior. And so taking a look at, how am I as a parent presenting the food to them? Am I coming with a good attitude? Am I ready for them? Am I prepared for this? Or am I dreading this mealtime? All of that energy can be sensed by the child. And it's very important to notice that as a trigger for maybe something that's happening at your mealtime. And Guy goes on to say that there is colossal power in how we react to things, not only in our behavior, but also in our unspoken thoughts and attitudes. And this is 100% hitting the nail on the head, because even our nonverbal communication is very important to the child. And what we communicate to them in our behavior, in our movements, in our reactions will really have an influence and an impact on what's happening next. And just another important note to put in, there are pressure situations with food. And it's very important that you don't have your child feel pressured or forced to eat in this situation, because they may already feel anxious or uncomfortable. So it's meeting them where they are. How are they feeling right now? And what can I do to make them more comfortable and to make them feel more safe? So if we do add the pressure to them, this can result in the child having a decreased appetite or maybe severely restricting their foods. So just remembering that your child is going at their own pace and to follow them. Let them initiate it, let them explore, and let them have that space to be who they are and to do what they want. And as a parent, guide them, sit with them, let them be your guide. And I think it's going to be a beautiful experience if you take off the pressure and realize, okay, I'm not going to force him to eat this. There are no expectations that he eats this. I'm just going to see what can I do to help him in this moment. And Andrew, one of our other therapists, makes a lovely note here that some professionals are trained to use food and eating for mealtime, and they do this with rewards or incentives. And he makes a note to just be careful of that, because having that on the child can actually have some unintended consequences for them. So good note, Andrew. And here is another slide that Zuzana has prepared, and I think it's a wonderful one for her to talk about. So Zuzana, would you like to explain the here and now for us?
I borrowed this picture from the internet. It's I've got the source down listed there. There's a big fashion of creating these beautiful images of breastfeeding mothers. I really love them. And I like the metaphor again of the mother feeding her baby, and how her emotional state and her connection with the child influences what she's giving to the child, and how what she's giving to the child influences the child's development and development at different levels: physiology, physical level, and emotional and intellectual. So I thought about the pressure, Kendall, and what is it you mentioned? Well, parents, you need to look at what causes the pressure and how can you reduce the pressure. And if you look at it with different language, what can help you feel comfortable and relaxed, and what can help you be in a here and now. And I'm slowing down how I speak, because one of the things that I always get to in my supervision when we reflect on our cases or in my work, the first thing, number one, always is pace. So we always have to look, how fast am I? Especially when I'm pressured, I feel like I need to be faster to do something, to achieve something, to prevent something, to do something. So we need to slow down. But when we are stressed, it's hard. So we need to be conscious about how fast we are. And with autistic children, we have to be slower and slower and even slower, because they experience the world through their senses differently, and perhaps they need much more time to engage with us and engage with us during meal times. And as I said, being slow and being relaxed is not as easy as it sounds, perhaps, especially if you are pressed to feed the child, because you want your child to do well, to be healthy, to get all the nutrients. And yes, as Andrew mentioned in his webinar last week, and I totally resonate with that. As a mother, you really want to feed your child well, and it's not only the breastfeeding is one, but when the child's older, you still, as a mothers, we will always want our children to eat well, and there's nothing more beautiful than a well-eating child. So there is a lot of pressure around food. So when we are pressed and in a stress response, our brain works at a kind of younger stage level, I would say. So we go, I don't know if you know Dan Siegel's model of a brain. If I very simplify it, we've got the spinal cord and the primitive part of the brain that deals with the bodily functions. Then we have emotional brain, and then we have the thinking brain. So when we are stressed, or pressured, and in a stress response, the thinking goes away. But we always have to remember there is little part of the thinking brain we can employ to calm down, to employ some strategies to help us. And I'm thinking about a child with autism who's stressed at a mealtime, perhaps the parent's stressed. The parent can reflect, oh, it's getting too hyped up, we are a bit all kind of stressed now. What would you do in that moment with a baby? If your child was a 9, if your child wasn't 7 or 3, if it was a tiny little baby, what would you do to take care of the very low primitive part of the brain? So I looked at the mother in the picture. I really like that. She feels happy. She feels relaxed. Perhaps it's not in a picture, but I was thinking, how am I sitting? Is my body comfortable? Maybe I need a blanket. Maybe I need a warm drink when I'm with my child at mealtime. So I can take off my physiological needs and change one thing just to make myself feel a bit better, maybe warmer or maybe cool down in the hot weather. Is there anyone else with me who can take over or who can make me the cup of tea? What I would also do with a baby, very young baby, I would very carefully follow the child's cues, non-verbal cues. So we know that autistic children might have difficulties communicating, or they communicate through behavior, but they also communicate via very subtle non-verbal gestures. So with a newborn baby, I would do that as well. Is the child saying no, or is the child saying more? So I would look at all these non-verbal cues. I wouldn't tell the child how much to feed. I would follow when he tells me. So I wouldn't say, no, one more bowl because this is what the norm is for tonight. So I would really think, what does the baby need? So I hope that explains it. Yes.
Yes. And I also have an example I wanted to share on top of that in regards to a stressful eating time. I worked with a client who was 2 years old, and his family never sat down at the table to eat. So it was always moving around, a very, you could say, American family, never really having a moment to just slow down and take a breath. And I was often the one in charge of the mealtime because I was there with him and his twin sisters who were 3. So imagine a family, 2 busy parents, twin girls at age 3, a boy with autism at age 2. Parents are a doctor, a lawyer, and I'm there to provide care. I noticed that the child was up and running during mealtime, never sitting down, never wanting to try foods and eat. And we started to look at, why is that? What is happening in his environment that is making this happen? It wasn't because he didn't like the food, because we knew the foods that he liked and he was being served those foods. When we really stepped back and we looked at what's happening in the environment right now, we got the parents to sit down at the table with us. So it was the girls, the parents, me, and this little boy. And the boy didn't move. The boy stayed there the whole mealtime and had a very big smile on his face because the parents took the time to think, oh, he just wanted to be with me, and I should have taken the time to sit with him. And it's a very natural thing as a parent to want to always be ahead and to always be preparing what's next, what can I do next to help my child. But when you really stay in the here and now, you think of, what does my child need right now? Does he need me to be preparing his lunch for the next day? Or does he need me to be sitting at the table with him, eating, or just sitting there having a nice hot drink? So really looking at, what are these circumstances and what are you doing as a parent to help them have a better experience during these meal times? So transitioning into some of our strategies, always important, make your child feel comfortable. Let this eating be a pleasant experience. We are wanting to help your child feel more relaxed and calm and even curious about these foods they are eating. We want them to be in control of what's happening. With doing this, it makes your child feel less anxious, less pressured, less out of control, less stressed even. So always thinking, how can I make this in the here and now, my child's experience, more positive and comfortable for them? Increasing their comfort is a very important thing. Looking at, how can I make this eating environment calm? How can I arrange the table in a way where, as Zuzana said, maybe the child's feet are touching the ground, maybe they feel grounded. How can I make the table smaller or bigger? If that's putting a variety of food in front of them, or maybe putting just one bowl of food in front of them. Just deciding what is best for your child and letting them initiate the process. So not forcing them to say, you need to have one of everything on the table, but saying, here's your dinner, eat what you want, I'm sitting here with you, you're in charge. Letting them know that they can be who they are in their comfort zone. Always try eating new foods in your child's presence. This is one of my favorites, and I have an example for this. When I was a preschool teacher, I loved when one of my childs would say, I don't like that food. And I would think, okay, I would bring that food with me the next day. So let's use as an example a banana. I don't like bananas, they're gross. Okay, so I would bring it the next day. I would have the banana with me. I would never interact with it with the child. I would never say, hey, you need to eat a bite of this. I would show it to the children, a bit of a show and tell, explain to them what a banana is, play with it a little bit. And then when it came to snack time, I would eat the banana. And sure enough, weeks later, this same child came up to me, do you have a banana I can eat today? And they were very willing and excited to try it. But this took weeks and I didn't force it. My goal was never, I want the child to eat the banana. My goal was, I want to expand their knowledge of foods. I want them to know what these different foods are, what different foods I enjoy eating, and letting them know that I find comfort in this. So when they are around you and you are eating something, that is something that they are observing all the time. So regardless of if it's vegetables or meat or a dessert, something where you notice that if you take interest in something, your child is probably going to feel more comfortable with it. It's the same as with exposure to anything. The more exposure you can get, the more less anxiety you feel, less stressed you feel around it, and the more comfortable you get. And Andrew put in this beautiful one, try soothing or calming music in the background. I haven't tried that with a family, but I have tried that for myself and absolutely makes a difference. And if you don't think so, try the opposite and try playing very hard rock music. You will find that your behavior in eating changes. And then when you play that calm music, maybe it's piano music or just background noise, you slow down. You start to realize, okay, what am I eating? What am I being conscious of what I'm putting in my mouth? And as it states here in the last bullet point, if your child is calm and relaxed, their acceptance for food and their interest in food will gradually grow at their own pace. So the goal is that if we can get our child to feel comfortable at the dinner table or at the lunch table, that is the best thing for them, because then hopefully their food issues would start to disappear.
Kendall, can I add as well?
Yes, I was about to say, Zuzana, jump in.
No, I've just listened to your banana story, and we often talk about mealtime, but I'm also very interested in what's happening between the meal times, as I said in the beginning. And I imagine that what the boy who ate the banana after a few weeks experienced with you wasn't just the banana experience, it was lots of other experiences during play. And it's any child, if they love you and if they love spending time with you, if they have that special one-to-one playtime when they are in charge and they have control and they show curiosity, they'll have that relationship. They'll think, I want to be like you. The song, hoo hoo, I want to be like you. So children want to be like us. They want to imitate the people they have positive relationship. They want to be like their big heroes. So it's very important to pay attention to how we interact with our child playfully, and how yes, the positive emotional experiences outside of the meal times are very important. Can
Yes.
I also add one example? It
Mhm.
goes back to the previous point as well. I once worked with a boy. Again, the situation was very complex. He had very bad eczema, and his mother was very anxious about food triggering bad allergic reaction. So as a result of that anxiety that was based on her experience of her child reacting really badly to food, she gradually reduced the number of foods he was exposed to, and it was literally five different items of food. And the mother felt comfortable with those because she felt safe with this food. Um, and the boy started to refuse, or he started to be much less willing to eat in general. And the mother, again, she found something that worked, and it was TV. So she set the boy in front of a TV, and every time he had a bite, she played a little bit of his favorite TV program. And this is how she taught him to eat. The difficulty with that was that he was not showing curiosity about the food. He wasn't actively engaged with the food, and he wasn't engaged with the person who fed him. And this was a way of feeding that was required from the mother to be done by everyone around him. So he was exposed to TV or screen at each mealtime to eat, and he wasn't able to explore with his senses, with his tactile sensory system and taste and smell, because his focus was on the visual stimulation of the TV. So that caused problems in the future, and I met the boy a few years later, and he was still fed in the same way, and he did suffer feeding difficulties still. So it's just an example of that. Having food in the body is not the only thing that happens during mealtime. There is a lot more happening.
Really great
So,
point.
so it's
Yeah.
all about fun as well, like you said. So
Mhm.
we are combining that fun and anxiety, and how to tackle that. How can we have fun when we are
Right.
anxious? And the same for a child. How can he enjoy if he's stressed? So we have to look at
Right.
the whole picture.
And I think you also made a really good point earlier about how the relationship you have with your child bleeds into mealtime. And if you can have that one-on-one play with them, and you can be that fun adult in their life, they can then think, I want to be like them. I love them so much. I now feel more comfortable around them. And I think that that relationship bleeds into meal times, and then the mealtime relationship bleeds into playtimes. So I think it's a constant balance, and it's a big interaction with each other. And another simple strategy, being responsive to your child's communication attempts. Very important, because if your child is trying to communicate something to you, it's probably them telling you something that is wrong, something that they are not comfortable with. So looking at what are they communicating, and how can I reduce their stress and anxiety? Responding very positively to their communication. If they refuse something, okay, try it again later. If they refuse it again, okay, try it again later. It doesn't mean that it's a forever no. And I mean, we were all children once, and we all refused food once. Our taste buds change. And just because they're not eating it now doesn't mean that you can never try that food again. You can always have it on your plate for dinner time, and then maybe months, years later, they might be asking for it. So always keep the curiosity, always keep introducing it to them. And if they refuse it, follow their lead. It's okay.
Can I add something to the communication?
Yes.
I've mentioned something before, but from my experience, when I'm with a child in a present moment, in a here and now, um, often much faster than it's needed. Um, it's hard for me sometimes to notice the very subtle communication cues. So what's very helpful is to actually sometimes record how I interact with the child and look back and perhaps slow down, or maybe even reduce the auditory side of the interaction. Just watch what happens, to notice the nonverbal communication and the speech of the body. The body will tell us, the subtle maybe just moving away. And if we notice what the body is saying to us, then we can reflect it back to the child, and the child might feel understood and felt, and it might contribute to their sense of developing sense of self, and that comfort and the relaxation and understanding of what's happening around them as well.
Great. And as we've stated prior, letting it expand at their pace, letting it expand gradually by slowly introducing these foods, being aware of their sensory properties. Is the texture rough? Is it soft? Is it mushy in their mouths? Can they squeeze it? Can they bite it? Do they chew it hard? Can they swallow it right away? Some examples down here: potato chips. What other things can be like sensory potato chips? With apples and applesauce, what other things can be sensory combined with it? So just being aware, what are their sensory needs, but also how can I gradually expand their curiosity and follow them at their pace for what they're eating? Some other points for that: they will try, this one I really love, they will try the food at their own pace, but a lot of the times they like to explore it first. They like to touch it first. They like to think, what is this? So this little boy I had in my preschool class with the banana, he probably felt that banana 100 times before he ate it. And I mean, at first it was just a touch. Then it was holding it, squeezing it, smelling it, wondering, what is this? Why do I have to open it to eat it? Huge confusion on his end, but huge curiosity as well. And that is what I really admired about this child. He took the time to play with it and to touch it. And although he didn't eat it for weeks, eventually he ate it because his comfort level grew.
And I would add as well, so when the children explore new foods, one of the things they're exploring is not only what is it safe? Do I like it? What is the smell like? What does it mean, this smell? What does this shape mean? What does the sound of the crunchiness mean? And you mentioned the sensory needs. We can call it sensory needs, and we can look at it from different perspectives and say, what do they love? Maybe they just love the crunchy. Or I had a girl who loved, she had log jelly or dried fruit kind of strings, and she loved the sensation of moving her tongue with it, and she could play for hours with it. So what is fun about the food they like, and how can we introduce more fun things like that feel safe, and they might discover that they're also safe and fun.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Zuzana, do you want to do this slide?
Mm-hmm. It's just going back to increasing your comfort around eating issues. And one thing that we said, there is this saying or quote that if you met one autistic child, you only met one autistic child. And we also mentioned that difficulties with eating and feeding are very complex. So what I find very helpful and fascinating is to learn from autistic people who have written their blogs or their articles, or who share their experience on YouTube in videos, and learn from what it is like to be autistic and have different sensory experience of food or around the surrounding during meal times. It's a very good way to get more insight. Another way what can help us be more comfortable is to learn from multidisciplinary team. And again, the more we understand the child's needs, the more we are likely to meet them and feel comfortable about our choices around meal times. There is something that I've heard many times from mothers, is their anxiety about giving children enough nutrients in their food. And again, if we cooperate with dietitian and nutritionist, they'll give us that reassurance that what the children get is enough or not enough, and how that can be supported. Learn from your child, as I suggested, with reading the nonverbal cues, and listen to your own gut instinct. That's a lot to learn from it. Learn from your feelings. And also, as I suggested with a beautiful picture earlier, be self-compassionate. It's difficult. It can be really difficult. And if you feel that it's difficult, it's probably because it's very difficult for your child as well. So I would always recommend for myself and everyone else, Christine Neff's self-compassion practice. And also part of what she teaches is surround yourself with support networks. Start with yourself, be support to yourself, but also be aware you're not the only one. There are lots of parents in your situations, and there are also lots of people who want to support you and add their little piece of puzzle to your puzzle.
So with that, we are coming to a close of our presentation for food issues.